Today we have the C7 chassis Audi S6. In this video, we're going over the top 5 problems that these cars have. The first problem we're going to talk about is the ride height sensors, and they're located on each lower control arm. You can see there is a little dog bone type connector right there, and it has a little arm, and it's going to go up and down with the suspension. The first common thing you're going to see is probably a light on the dash saying there's a service suspension message. So if you have that message, you're going to want to scan it with a scan tool and figure out which sensor is at fault. And on the rear sensors, it's the same thing. It's connected to the lower control arm. They're buried a little bit on the rear, but you can still see where they are. Another symptom of a faulty sensor is the vehicle sagging. So if you notice that the vehicle looks lower on one corner or even front to rear, that's probably from one of those sensors. If you notice the vehicle sagging, you could also have an airbag problem. At each wheel, you're going to have an airbag that looks like this. There's 2 in the rear, 2 in the front, and it's just like a balloon. If there's a hole in it, the air is going to leak out. While we're talking about the suspension, let's talk about the upper control arms located right here. And there's a ball joint on one side and a bushing on the other. Over time, they wear out. And if you need those, you can get those at AWD.com. Another common complaint on these vehicles is the sudden lack of power. Now that can come from many different areas, but the common area we find is the turbochargers failing. The reason why the turbos are failing is because of oil starvation. There's oil feed lines and there's filters in there, and they clog up over time because of lack of oil changes. So to prevent this, you want to make sure you change your oil regularly. The next common issue we're going to talk about is the ignition coils. It being a V8 engine, we have 4 coil packs on each side of the engine, and the symptoms you're going to notice is a misfire or the engine running rough. You'll probably even see a check engine light flashing on the dash. As you can see, the ignition coils are buried a little bit. You're going to need to remove some different parts just to access them. And while you're doing those ignition coils, you want to replace those spark plugs because they're so buried in there, you don't want to have to do it again. And while we're talking about hard to reach parts, let's talk about the water pump, which is buried way down in the front. The symptoms you're going to find with a water pump is coolant leaking on the ground, the coolant level being low. You may even see a low coolant light on the dash. Worst case scenario, if you ignored those signs, you're probably going to overheat your engine. Just because the water pump's hard to see doesn't mean it's impossible to do. These Audis, you generally have to put them in service mode where you take the front end of the vehicle and tip it forward or pull it off just to access it. It's going to be a lot easier once you do that. On these cars, it's common for the AC to not work properly. You may notice hot air coming out, and it could be due to many different things, but the common issue that we're seeing is the cabin filter not being replaced enough. Debris is getting past the cabin filter into the evap core, and that's causing some issues. So you want to make sure you change that cabin filter, and you can get those at AWD.com. So those are the top 5 problems that we found on this Audi S6. If you need any parts for your vehicle, make sure you click the link in the description, go over to AWD.com. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Today we have this, check this out. We have this C7 chassis Audi S6. Do it again. Today we have this 7... We're going to be going over the top 5 problems. And that's it. That's all I got.